Hello, here we are again. Today is February the 9th, 2018. It's half past 1 p.m. And today, sitting next to me, we have Jason from Virginia, which is Midwest, as far as I know.
A little bit on the East Coast.
East,
Yeah,
all right.
Near Washington.
All right, sorry. And not really that familiar with the American geography. Sorry. And basically, he is into Amazon FBA and stuff like that. But the main reason why I asked him to be part of this YouTube show, whatever you want to call it, is because of his expertise when it comes to basically bureaucracy. Because this guy over here has been on the road for a while, at least like 3 years.
Almost 5 years, actually.
All right.
4.5, yeah.
All right, so he definitely knows his stuff. And plus, he probably can give us some advice when it comes to probably incorporate businesses in the United States, I would say. Let's see. So we're gonna have our regular chat and follow the flow, basically. All right, so the first question for you, man, would be, actually, where have you been during the past years?
Well, for as far as places that I spent more than a week visiting,
Yeah.
and I think I've been to Thailand and in 2013 and 14. Then I left, and I spent most of the last 3 years in South America, primarily in Ecuador. A couple months in, about 3 months in Chile, a few months in Peru, a month in Argentina, and then also I did about 9 months in Colombia, near Medellin, in a town called Sabaneta. So I've been in the Latin American part of the world for the last 3 years until I just got back here a couple months ago. But I also have spent some time researching a number of other countries in terms of the requirements to live there and setting up there, more than I have been to.
Okay.
So, but I'd say I've spent an extensive amount of time in about 4 countries the last few years.
That's pretty awesome. So far, what is your pick? If you be forced to pick some place to stay, I'm not say forever, but for years and years, what would be your first pick?
Well, I think it would depend on how many years. Each place would probably have a more ideal fit for a certain amount of years.
Okay.
I would say I spent the most amount of time in Ecuador probably because I liked it the most in terms of a place that you can settle in and spend a few years in. But if I was to go for a longer period of time, maybe 5 years or more, I might choose Chile just because it's more developed.
Okay.
I would say Thailand can be good for some people here for a long term, but they make it very difficult for the average, I would say the average nomad or the average person to establish any sort of roots here. So I would say Thailand is more like a place that's good for X amount of months, maybe up to a year or two if you're okay with student visas. But basically you're always on sort of in Thailand you're on sort of unless you have a career and you work for a Thai company, you're not really able to put down any sort of permanent roots here. So I would say Thailand probably doesn't suit most people who aren't doing those types of permanent things in Thailand. I would probably say for a couple years Ecuador, and for more than that probably Chile.
All right. So it seems like, correct me if I'm mistaken. So it seems like that stay for a while in Thailand is possible, definitely, but then bureaucracy probably would be a pain, right?
Well, if you're talking about trying to establish a long-term residence, the bureaucracy is pretty brutal here, yeah. And they only give, for example, long-term to me that means getting permanent residence in a country, a permanent resident status, and they give very few of those in Thailand per year to foreigners. So I think if you're looking to stay, for people who are looking to stay a couple months at a time, even up to a couple of years on the basis of not having legal residence, but doing something like an education visa or a year-to-year work visa, maybe teaching a language like English is common to teach here, then I think it's still not very much of a bureaucratic hassle if you're okay with a couple of the rules that they have in Thailand, which is if you're on a 1-year visa, you have to check in with them every 90 days.
Okay.
Most visas require that, and that seems kind of burdensome for a lot of people, but Most countries don't have that kind of requirement. Yeah, it's almost like you have to check in with mom and dad sometimes. But it's actually easy enough to do if you once you've done it once or twice. And I'd say, the tourist visas are tough for most people from Western countries, including all of the European Union countries. You only get 30 days to stamp in. You can extend 30 days, and then you have to leave again. So you're looking at going to do something official with the bureaucracy every 30 days. Okay. And that can be burdensome too. So yes, I would say Thailand has a moderate level of bureaucratic stuff to deal with.
Okay. You mentioned something about getting the visa done permanently. Do they organize? There's no worries. It's gonna work. It's gonna work. Yeah, already tested. So I was saying, you mentioned something about long-term staying here. How does it work? So I assume one option would be, of course, getting married. Of course, getting hired by a local company, maybe. Do they have some sort of green card lottery like the one you guys have in the States?
They have to the extent that I've looked into, you're talking about green card, that's basically permanent residence. To the extent that I've looked into it, most countries have a quota rather than a lottery. I think it's something like 100 or 200 per year for most countries. I don't know the details on that. But you would have to have, and actually it might be only 100 per category. For example, they might not necessarily include people who are married to Thai spouses. Okay. So that would definitely be one way to do it. But even then, I've heard that immigration checks on you to make sure it's not a sham. I have one friend who will probably be married to his Thai girlfriend in the future, and I think some other folks that I've talked to have the experiences of having to prove the marriage regularly with Thai immigration. But really, I think it's difficult to get a Thai job with a Thai company that's a career type of job. But for people who want to stay in Thailand, that's probably the best way to put down roots, other than marriage. And I think otherwise you just have to be prepared for a certain amount of regular maintenance of your legal status in Thailand. It's not the easiest place to stay long term for most people, but it can be done, and it can be done for a long period of time. I think, speaking to your point, is it can be done through a variety of options. They also have, for people with a fair amount of money, investor visas. But for most people that really want to stay here for 4 or 5 years, I think they look at the education visa first. And then they take it from there. But I do know a few people who are working for Thai companies, and they have no problem renewing their visas every year. And those are the people who are most likely to get permanent resident status, even if they don't marry a citizen. Okay,
that's interesting. I remember that a few years ago, I used to work for a language school in Madrid, right? And a few customers, they are Americans, right? And they basically started studying this school in order to get the student visa. Right. So you're talking about the same thing, right?
Yeah, well, yes and no. I would say if for people who want a permanent legal status in Thailand, the student visa will never do it. Also, in Ecuador, where I spent a year and a half, it will not do it. But some countries, a student visa does qualify you for sort of a path to a permanent residency. You get an actual legal status on a student visa. In a Latin American world, they call it a cedula. You are a legal resident, you get a cedula, which is basically an ID. In Colombia, where I spent most of 2017, a student visa will count as time spent that helps you build towards permanent residency. In Colombia's case, it's 5 years just to get permanent residency.
That's not bad at all.
Well, it's not bad, but it's not fast. For example, in Ecuador, a student visa doesn't count towards permanent residency, but if you get another type of visa that does count for permanent residency, it can be done in 2 years in Ecuador.
Wow. So what would be the alternative to the student visa?
The first thing a lot of people look at is a student visa. So you have to suss out the countries that do allow student visas to lead to some sort of permanent status, and the countries that don't. Ecuador is one of those that don't.
Okay.
Thailand is one of those that don't.
Okay.
Colombia is one of those that do. A few other, I don't know all the countries. I would say the best alternative for most people in the Latin American world, for those who are interested in speaking Spanish and living in a Spanish-speaking culture, is a professional visa. A number of those countries actually let immigrants come in just by being qualified with nothing more than a college degree.
Nice.
Yeah, Ecuador has one of those visas. I'm pretty certain Peru does. Mexico, I don't know if Colombia does. But that's if people are looking to find a home, that's one of the first things that they look at. Number one, does a student visa allow, again, not for travelers really, not for nomads who don't really care about staying in a place beyond a year, but for those who do want to stay longer, I think those are the first two things they're going to want to find out. Does a student visa in this country lead to a permanent residency? And number two, can you get a professional visa just by having a college degree?
That's awesome.
Which not every country in South America or Latin America does. Maybe Mexico does. I'd have to look into that, but a lot of them do. So for people who like Spanish-speaking countries, those are two pretty easy options that a lot of people can qualify for.
That's a really, really nice piece of advice. Really nice. Thank you so much for sharing it. How did you learn it? Like doing research, or you have some resources, or?
Well, I think most countries these days have a fairly comprehensive immigration website, and you just need to go to those websites. Or really, the fastest way to learn, if you don't need, if you're looking for basic information to get started, I think Facebook groups are the best way to get some initial information, and then you can go to the immigration websites of the various countries. I mean, I've looked at probably 10 or 12 different countries' immigration websites just to try to verify what you hear on Facebook, because you should certainly never go by what you hear from another guy unless they've done it. But it's a great way to start in gathering information, is just on Facebook.
And plus, the information from this or that guy need to be recent, because, for instance, a guy told me that I had, in theory, I just need to show up at the airport. They're just going to put how do you call it? A stamp. Yeah, sorry, on my passport, and in theory it was ready to go. But no, I had to, when it comes to Thailand, I had to go to the embassy in order to ask for a 60 days visa. So that was work for me. So definitely, you're definitely right. Ask around, do your homework, but you might want to check everything out, because somebody, maybe this or that guy, he's right. But things change, right?
Well, that was the other point. Number one, nobody should take advice from someone who hasn't done anything. Even me, if you think that I'm going to be the absolute expert on telling you what you can get in what country, not necessarily what I know is true today. What I tell you that I know might be true today, but by 2019, a lot of this will change.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Ecuador, where I lived in 2015 and 2016, had a massive change. Well, actually, I would say they're in the process of implementing changes, and they have been over the last 6 to 9 months, and it's a long process. So what's true today might not be true tomorrow. There was a implementation of a health insurance requirement that was supposed to take place literally just 2 or 3 days ago, and the day before that, the president issued some sort of executive order saying we're going to delay implementation of this. So things can change literally on a daily basis. So you don't want to listen to necessarily anybody who has some basic advice on the internet. This is just to point people in the right direction. But absolutely, people need to be mindful of the frequency of changes, and there's no way to ensure success in terms of pursuing a permanent place to live, or even a fairly long-term visa, like using a professional. And sometimes that means a lawyer, but oftentimes these procedures can be done with just visa assistants and facilitators, and they're a lot less expensive. But those are the professionals who are going to give you the best information, because they specialize in that one country.
Nice. Which makes totally sense. I don't know if you're familiar with this resource. A couple of years ago, I found out a blog which is called the Nomadi Capitalist or something like that. Do you know it?
Yeah, I've read a few articles on it.
Yeah, it's pretty good, or at least seems kind of legit. But still, you want to check everything out.
Right. I think again, the person who writes, the people who there's one guy who writes most of the articles on that, but there's some contributors. All that's a blog. That stuff becomes dated quickly. But I think there's some sharing of information and opinions and things that are true that are at the time it was written that aren't necessarily true a couple months later. But that is a site that has a fair amount of information on a variety of things like residency, taxes, I think business, investment, and related issues. But the important thing is, I think if someone has a specific place that they want to live in mind, the important thing to do is to go straight to a specialist in that one country. That's where you're going to get the most accurate and most current information.
Absolutely. And by the way, both of us, you and me, we have our own North American and European passport, which are kind of strong passports, right? That's a big advantage, right? What do you think about it?
Well, I think that when having a passport that allows you to travel to most countries, the main thing, for example, an Italian passport and an American or Canadian or British or Australian or whatever, and it allows you to do for nomads, basically. It allows you to go to a lot of places and not really have to worry about these issues that we've been talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Some countries let you stay for 180 days just by walking in. Mexico is one of those countries, actually, at least for Americans. I'm not sure about EU citizens. So I think the idea of a long-term residence is something that people from Europe and basically the Western countries generally don't have to deal with if they're looking at up to 3 to 6 months for most places. I mean, even in Thailand, really, you don't need a year-round visa if you want to stay up to 9 months of the year. You can actually do it all in really even 11 months if you do it just right. I mean, you don't need to do anything more than a tourist visa if you want to be here 10 or 11 months of the year. It's really a question of whether or not travelers want to establish roots and some sort of permanence in a country where they have an absolute legal right to be there for the period of validity of their visas. And that is a concern to some people, but not to others.
No, especially not in this whole digital nomad bubble. Most of us just want to travel and stay here for 2, 4, 7 months or something. Right. And in that case, you can do the so-called visa rounds, right?
It depends on the country, but for example, I know in Chile, if you go in there for 90 days, they're pretty lax about doing back-to-back visas. You can do for a year. Was the last information I had, and I haven't looked into it since 2016 when I was there. But Thailand is a lot stricter than they used to be. When I first came here in 2013, they weren't very serious about disallow. They've been off and on. Like I remember in 2006, I know a guy who has lived here since then, and at that time he told me once that they had a 6 months per year policy, but then they relaxed that, and it was a pretty loose policy until I think 2014. And now I think they will allow you to do a couple back-to-backs, but not more than 2. But
sorry, what do you mean by back-to-back?
Back-to-back means basically having a 60-day visa, and whether you extend it or leave at the end of the 60 days, going out and coming right back in on another visa of the exact same type. Okay. So, tourist visas, basically tourist visas. Okay. What they don't really allow anymore also is doing your 30-day entry stamp, going across the border and coming back in. Used to be a lot of people here that would do that just to be able to stay, and that's not really allowed for the full year anymore. I think you only get a couple times of that, and that doesn't add up to many days in the year if you're just doing 30 at a time. So that's not ideal. A tourist visa would be a better place to start.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I done to get here for 60 days without no brain. So basically, correct me if I'm mistaken, you just get your 60-day tourist visa, whatever, and if you're willing to stay here longer, you go to Laos or whatever, asking for another 60-day tourist visa, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to avoid actually having to leave in 60 days, you can get a visa extension. On every tourist visa in Thailand, you can get an extra 30 days. So you can be here for almost 3 months.
Okay.
But then, yeah, you'd have to leave the country, get another one, but you can't continue to do that indefinitely.
Yeah, sure.
You would, if it's a single entry tourist visa. There are stricter requirements for a tourist visa that has a 6-month validity. Right now it's called the multi-entry tourist visa.
Okay.
And it's good for 6 months. And if you make, you still only get 60 days every entry. But if you manage to stay for the first 60 days on that, you'd have to do some extensions. But if you come back in the day before that 6 months ends, then you get another 60 days plus the 30 days extension. And that alone, the multiple entry tourist visa, that one visa can give you almost 9 months of residence here, not without some border runs, but you could basically do it.
Well, is there any kind of requirement to apply for a kind of visa?
You have to apply for that at a Thai consulate in the country where you either are from or have legal residence in. Again, another benefit of legal residence we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Generally, you have to prove something like $7,000 in an account. I'm not sure on the details, but basically, and sometimes they require letters from your employers. But different consulates in different countries will have various levels of enforcement. And some rules they enforce strictly, and some are a little more casual. Who knows? But it's a more difficult visa to get. Whereas the single entry tourist visa, you don't have to prove anything. You don't have to provide documentation other than your passport photo and just fill out an application.
And that's it. Speaking of legal rights and residency, I assume you probably heard something about the e-residency from Estonia, right? I'm not really an expert about it. Probably not you as well, because of course it's some sort of European stuff, but it seems to be pretty interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because
I think it is. Yeah.
Because basically you can, in theory, you can incorporate your online business in Estonia. Do you know anybody who has done that or something like that?
Among people I personally know, no, I don't know anybody that's done that, but I've actually listened to a couple of podcast interviews with people who have done that, as well as the person I can't remember his name. He's an Estonian who's the director of the program, and he's explained the details of what it is. Basically, it doesn't give you any sort of legal status in the country of Estonia.
Okay.
But it does allow you to conduct business in Estonia, and that's great for people who are not European Union citizens or American citizens, and they don't have access to the European banking system. Maybe someone is from Thailand who wants to start a e-commerce business. That would be a program that would help them. But basically, I think also it allows you to choose some sort of a better structure, maybe for a business or for your taxes. If you don't want to necessarily have everything that you do tied to the country you're from just because you're from there, maybe your country taxes a little bit higher. I mean, I think they are kind of high in Italy. But so what it does is allows you to pay a fee. They do a background check on you, and banking is one of the main things, and company registration. Those are the two main things that I know of offhand that it gives members the ability to do right off the bat, and it gives you a digital ID. Like you can sign legal documents through it. But I think for people that do want to diversify their business and banking, it's something to look into. I'm actually planning to check it out myself. Actually, go through the process sometime in this spring, and I'll let you know what happens. But
yes, please.
Yeah,
I will. But sooner or later, I will try to look into this. Not right now, because right now I'm in grind mode, so I'm focused on the business itself. But sooner or later. But correct me if I understood wrong. So let's say a guy from Thailand. This guy wants to enter in the European market and sell stuff in the EU. But in order to do so, he is supposed to have a European bank account. And if that's the case, he can apply for an e-residency in Estonia, and then if he got accepted, and probably he will be able to open a European bank account. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know necessarily that that's the only way to
sure.
sell in the European market, but it gives them more options. Maybe it doesn't. Thailand taxes actually are pretty high. So if a person has a legal footprint in Thailand, they'll be able to pass a Thai person has all of that, some sort of a way to check out clean through the background check that they do. I mean, if it's someone selling food on the carts of the street, they'll never pass because they don't have much of a legal foot. They live in a cash world. They won't get approved by the program. They have to have some sort of a history to pass the background check. Okay. That's absolutely mandatory. But it does facilitate an easier flow of business. Like, for example, if someone wanted to do some sort of e-commerce who didn't have that, they would be able to find a way through payment services, but the fees that the local e-commerce entrepreneur would have to deal with by not having proper banking would be a lot higher. So I would say there's ways for people to conduct business online without having some sort of access to European banking or a European business structure, but it just facilitates an easier flow of business and lower fees.
Yeah, especially because you want to try to keep it simple as much as you can, right? Because maybe you spend a lot of time thinking about bureaucracy, and on the other hand, you're wasting that time thinking about bureaucracy, you know what I mean? So yeah, it would make sense. Right. So for instance, in Italy, when we met, we actually had a little conversation about this, guys. So basically I told you that if you go with e-commerce in Italy, you're supposed to pay $3,000 and 600, even though you make zero sales.
3,600 euros.
Yeah, per year. And then also a percentage out of the sales, which
is that like a license fee or the business license? Why do they make you pay taxes when you don't profit? I'm just curious. Okay.
Yeah, I have no clue.
Your audience will probably know about it.
Yes, some of them at least, yeah, because I think that if you're under 30 or something, you can ask for a sort of cut. So instead of paying $3,000 and 600, you might be able to pay $2,000 and 700, but still, it's insane, right? It's insane. So lots of people told me, all right, you might want to incorporate abroad. And this is the second part of this chat, because I met a few guys, well, actually many guys from the US who are doing drop shipping. I'm into drop shipping, right? And some of them, they're incorporated in Delaware, in Texas, and I wonder why. Do you have any, can you please elaborate this? Because I assume that taxes in Delaware are lower, probably. So what can you tell us about it?
Well, I am the last person who would know the legal system in America. So I've never gone to law school or anything like that. But I think why people would choose to incorporate in Delaware and Wyoming is because those particular jurisdictions, I just have a basic overview. Those jurisdictions are never going to be free of American corporate federal tax.
Okay.
But they are free of state taxes.
Oh, all right.
So, and for example, California, New York, they tend to have profits, they tend to have taxes on your profits that are among the highest in America. And, excuse me.
No worries.
And, but they do allow you to avoid corporate state income taxes.
Okay.
They also are, Wyoming and Delaware have relatively easy and straightforward ways to set up a company, and they don't have as much I would say, like Delaware, I want to say Delaware has something like a $300 startup license fee or something like that. Wow. Wyoming's even less. I don't know the details. There are a few lawyers who can give that have some prominence on the internet that can give some more information on that. But you know, those are maybe the best states to use for American corporations, but I don't necessarily think it would be the first thing I would advise an Italian person to do, to go run off to America and set up a company, unless you had it through some sort of a holding structure where all the American company did was conduct operations of the business, like banking. There's a lot of advantages in American banking, but the actual main company that took the profits would still be in another jurisdiction. There are some ways that it can work. Again, I wouldn't go into the details on it because I don't know them. But if someone feels the need to be incorporated in America, I think those are the better states to go to, and that's why people choose Delaware and Wyoming.
All right, good to know. Yeah, I knew about Delaware. Didn't know about Wyoming though. So thank you. So yeah, I think I will not incorporate in the states. Mm-hmm. Again, I will keep going with the Italian government for a while.
Right, yeah.
But maybe I could pick some other European country, maybe Estonia or
right.
Canary Islands. Canary Islands, they're good when it comes to tax and stuff like that. But downside is, and that's my main concern, let me know what you think about it, is that in order to escape, let's say so, escape from the Italian system, mm-hmm. you are literally forced to trash your ID, basically.
You have to get out of the tax
you have to
system.
In order to be completely free from that system, you must be okay with quitting your health insurance, for instance, your health insurance system. Of course, you can incorporate in other places and get another European health insurance system, but it would be different still.
So the reason that you would have to give up all of those is because Italy is one of the many countries that say if you're a resident of our country, you owe taxes on your income worldwide. Doesn't matter where you earn them. Personal income tax, not business income tax, but personal income tax, you'll owe tax wherever you do the business if you're a resident of this country. And the Italian government's logic is, well, if you have insurance in Italy, you must be a resident. It doesn't matter if you're not spending time there. You're officially, if you haven't established residence in another country, you might have a hard time telling your home country, hey, I'm not really an official resident there. I don't live there. They'll say, well, you might not live here, but you're still officially, you don't have a residence anywhere else. Therefore, your official residence is still Italy. So that's why you would have to actually go through those steps to get out of the entire system, trash your ID, as you say, and get rid of all kinds of things that sort of tie you to that country. Yeah. Maybe even including your personal bank account.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm not saying literally, actually, not really literally trash the ID, but yeah, basically, yeah, you have to
deactivate it.
Deactivate it. You have to, as far as I know, you have to close your Italian bank account and drop everything, which is my main concern right now. Yeah, so
Estonia might be a good option for you.
You know something, probably, especially if I plan to travel. Because if you try to get a residency, correct me if I'm mistaken, in theory, many places you're supposed to stay in the place for 6+ months, right? And I'm not willing to stay in one country for 6+ months at this time. So maybe e-residency would be a solution.
So if e-residency would be a solution for you in terms of being able to structure your business tax and not have it be an Italian company where all your profits, no matter how small, are subject to Italian income taxes. But if you're not willing to stay in a place over 6 months in order to establish personal tax residency, which is a different issue than corporate income tax, then you're going to have a hard time telling your government that you're not a resident there and that you don't owe personal income tax. So the only way to really reduce your Italy income tax bill was to have most of your profits stay in a company in a country like Estonia. It's not the only one. I think Lithuania has a good low tax. It's an alternative. We can talk about that in a minute. But I think what you would have to do is have your Estonia company pay you a relatively small salary so that you're okay paying taxes to the Italian government. You say, yes, I do owe worldwide tax. I work for XYZ company in Estonia. They pay me this small salary of, 20,000 euros, and you would have to still pay the tax to your government, but at least you're not necessarily paying personal income taxes on all profits that you make in business. A lot of those profits can stay in Estonia and in your Estonian corporation. And one of the advantages of an Estonian corporation is that they let you defer taxes indefinitely as long as you keep that money or reinvest that money in Estonia. Okay. So if you don't take a profit distribution, a profit share that goes from your Estonia corporation to your own personal funds, then you don't have to pay taxes on it. Now, if you do take profits out of the company, then you'd have to pay additional taxes.
Okay. I think something like this applies also to Romania. Somebody told me something similar about the fact you can incorporate somewhere over there and basically contract yourself like an employee or something like that.
Right.
Something like that. You mentioned something about Lithuania, right?
Yeah, I think this is Lithuania that I'm talking about. There is a provision in the tax code for micro corporations,
Okay.
and I'm a little confused right now. I'm pretty sure it's Lithuania, and it's like 5% corporate income tax. So there's no way to get zero, but if you make a substantial amount of profits and you want to pay some taxes immediately, and be caught up with your taxes, that's a good way to go. I believe it's, like I said, I believe it's Lithuania. It could be Romania. But where I always go when I'm not sure of something, like right now, I'm not 100% sure, what I always do is I go look at the published documents that the major accounting firms put online. For example, Deloitte, Deloitte, they're one of the major corporations, major accounting firms, and they have all kinds of free information that they make as sort of like a summary. So I would say, whatever country I need to find out information, I say Deloitte, tax highlights, I put the year, and then I put the country. Yes. And then you can get a PDF document. Not every country in the world, but most of the non-tax haven countries, they will actually have a 2-page PDF overview of the tax laws. And I think the last time I did that for Lithuania, I read something about a provision. And I tell you what, when I go home after this interview, I'll look up Lithuania to see if I have the country right.
All right.
And if I've got the country wrong, I'll tell you, and you can cut all this out of the video. But I think it's Lithuania. It's something like under 300,000 euros. One of these countries, probably Lithuania, allows you to have that lower income tax rate. If you're over that, of course, you have a more substantial tax rate. But I'm not sure that it's Lithuania.
Yeah, no worries. It's still interesting. We're gonna sort it out and do our research.
The bottom line is really you got to do what you're doing. Just get the income going first, and then deal with you don't have to worry about taxes if you're not making much money. So you gotta get there first.
Absolutely. I assume you know Johnny Jen, right? Johnny FD, and I met him back in November, I think, Canary Islands. So we had a nice conversation about dropshipping and stuff like that. I was like, man, it's super awesome. I'm getting some results, actually pretty good. But the problem is in Italy, taxes. So I explained everything about three grand and something. And he gave me a really, really nice reply, which was, yeah, it's a pain, basically. It's a pain, but it also means that competition is scared because of taxes, which makes sense, right? Yeah. So yeah, definitely. I will keep going with the Italian system and make money first, and then and let's see what happens. Sure, yeah. Right. So let's chill out with a couple of nice other information. Actually, no. Let's chill out and talk about your future plans. So you're gonna stay here in Thailand, right, for a while, and then you travel to where?
Well, that's one of the reasons I've been spending some time Googling tax laws and residency laws, just because I'm not sure yet. Okay. You know, I do know that I want to probably go to Europe. I might go to Mexico. There are some cities in Mexico that aren't particularly dangerous, and there's a lot of beautiful places there. So I have my eye on Mexico, as it's one place in Latin America that I haven't been in many years. I probably haven't been to Mexico in 10 years. But first, after I'm done staying here, I want to look at some of the Eastern European countries. I want to visit Western Europe, you know, but I wouldn't stay more than 90 days in most of those countries unless I decide a few years down the line to try to get residency. But right now, I'm looking at Lithuania, I'm looking at Georgia, I'm looking at Hungary.
All right.
Maybe even the Czech Republic. So I'm going to pick one of those countries to arrive as a tourist visa, with a tourist visa, arrive in there, and then just try to suss out the options and see where I want to be. I'll probably move around a little bit, just to try to see what I like. But so my plans are to wait at least 6 months, maybe a year or two here, and then move on and see what Europe has to offer. But I don't like doing the 1 month in every country thing. It's just not my preferred way to live. I don't like being in living out of a suitcase very often. I did that for 5 months in 2016 after we left Ecuador. I spent a lot of time in Argentina and Peru, and in Chile, and during that 5 months I didn't just stay in one apartment in each place. I wanted to see a lot of, and after 4 or 5 months it gets to be pretty tiring for me living out of a suitcase. So I'm interested in the idea of finding a place I can get residency in that isn't necessarily my home country, so I have options of other places to live in, and I don't always have to go back home just because my tourist stamp has run out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know how the weather is in Virginia, but make sure you do not go to Eastern Europe during winter or fall, because it's awful.
Right. I'd say I'm from the Washington, D.C. area, and I think the weather is pretty close to what you might find in Milan or some of the central cities in the mountains. Like, I don't know, maybe Munich. It's really cold in the winter, but it can get hot. It can get hot in the summer. It's a normal four-season city. Really cold at times in the winter and really hot at times in the summer. So.
One thing that actually just made me think about something. Somebody gave me a nice advice years ago. The advice was the following one. He said that you can do your research regarding taxes, bureaucracy, stuff like that, but you might don't want to focus just on that, because perhaps in country A you will end up paying low taxes, but then the psychological cost of living because of weather, for instance, will be high. So let's say in Hungary, for instance, I don't know the bureaucracy in Hungary, but let's say that bureaucracy in Hungary is easy, taxes are low, but if you like warm weather, it's a problem. You know what I mean?
I think that's absolutely, you hit the nail on the head. That's absolutely one of the biggest factors, is anybody that's looking for a place to sort of put down roots and live for a long term, not necessarily permanently, but long term, is the importance of not focusing on one thing, just tax or just the business structure, just the beach, you know, I mean, just the weather, you know. A lot of people love the beaches in Thailand. People up here in Chiang Mai aren't really here for the beaches, they're here more for the culture and the mountains, but no single factor would make me decide anything. I think I know someone who's from Russia, and he told me, he said, I need sun, and he almost doesn't care about anything else. Yep. But he's not balancing 3 or 4 different factors, and I wouldn't do it that way. So I'd say, you know, if weather is really important, maybe you don't choose a place with 4 seasons like Prague or Budapest. But also, if you find that having a nice European culture is the most important thing to you, you don't mind wearing a coat in the winter, and you don't mind wearing shorts. Yep. And so maybe Budapest is a great place for someone else. Sure. A different person. You just the most important thing to do is to consider all these factors. How are you going to feel psychologically about being in a place? Are you happy there? Do you like the weather? Do you like the food? Do you like the culture? Are you okay with the tax structure? Are you okay with the residency and legal bureaucracy? The way that you have to deal with operating a business in that country if you operate it on the ground or online, but you still have to follow the laws of that particular jurisdiction. You've got to weigh 5 or 10 different factors before you choose a place, and that's one reason why, you know, for now I've been looking into this stuff for several years now, and I haven't chosen a place because I want to go to most of these places before I decide. Weigh all the factors, because there is no one perfect place. I know what I would want if I could pick the perfect country, but it doesn't exist. So you have to sort of balance out which 7 of 10 things are going to work best for you, and that's kind of it's like a puzzle.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Personally, I do like Chiang Mai a lot. I do like the fact that we are here in this amazing culture, and then you also have the digital nomad culture and everything. But at the end of the day, I do hate the fact that I'm not able to speak with locals, which is my fault because I should start learning the language, but it's just me. So in my case, language is a big thing. But that, again, it's just me, so it's personal.
Yeah, it totally is. And I think one of the disadvantages of a country like Thailand or Hungary or Bulgaria is you're going to, and these are all countries that have a lot of appeal to live in for digital nomads and people like me who would prefer a more long-term place, is they are all one country languages. So I don't blame anybody for not really focusing in on learning a one country language, which is one of the reasons for trying to go to Latin America. You know, you have probably, what was it, between South America and Central America, you have a couple dozen countries to choose from. I probably wouldn't learn Italian for the same reason, because San Marino and Italy, and where else can you speak Italian?
Just part of Switzerland.
Part of Switzerland, right?
And
Yeah. So unless I was committed to staying in that country and in that region of the country for basically a lifetime, I don't think I would invest more than 50 or 100 hours in getting up to a moderate level of proficiency in a language. But like Thailand, I don't think unless I decided to stay here for a decade or more, I would bother learning beyond a pretty elementary level of the language. Whereas in Latin America, there's a lot of geographical and climate diversity, and you can choose most of the type of lifestyle options that you want throughout that whole part of the world. And no matter what you end up deciding, if you put in the time to learn Spanish, that's gonna plug you into probably 25 different countries. You have a lot more options with one language. Germany, there's some options. French, there's a number of options. So in Russian, of course, we talked about that earlier. If you learn some Russian, you probably have another 6 to 10 countries to choose from. That you may not really integrate into the culture, because each of these countries have their own local languages, but you're doing well enough by having some Russian to get around. It's a very practical language. Chinese is a little different. It's the most widely spoken language in the world, but it doesn't help in a lot of different countries.
Absolutely. Actually, of course, it's a really important language, of course. Of course, lots of people speak it, but that's just because they were born there, and there are lots of Chinese people, right? But to me, I would prioritize differently. I would learn German or Russian, for instance, or Spanish, of course, which I speak.
Or French. But I think, unless for people who know where they want to be, learn that language. It's absolutely the key to culture is language. But if you don't know where you want to be, I think, and try to figure out a region, and narrow it down from there. A lot of people like Eastern Europe. I think it's a good idea for those people who haven't decided where they want to be, but they do know that they want to be in Eastern Europe, to pick up some Russian and get up to a good advanced beginner or maybe intermediate level, and then decide where they want to be. There's a fair amount of climate and geographic and geological diversity in the Russian-speaking countries. You can choose relatively warm climates there. And you can get around, or you can just be in the mountains and ski all half the year, and you can get around with having Russian. So Russian's a decent. I don't know a single word except niet. So I'm not particularly eager to learn Russian. I may at some point, but I haven't picked up any now. The last few years I just did Spanish, and it helped. It allowed me to knowing a little bit of Spanish helped me get around, and I would learn it much more. I would put a lot more time into it if I decide that I'm going to be in the Latin American world for the next 5 or 10 years, and I haven't made that decision yet. But I think my level of studying a language is somewhere in keeping with what I've decided in terms of the amount of time I want to spend there. Until I make a decision, I'm not going to try to pursue fluency in any language. I'm certainly not fluent here. But I have a couple hundred words, and I can bargain prices. That's all. That's all you need if you're traveling around. If you're a digital nomad, it's nice to know 50 to 100 words, and the number system anywhere you go. So pick up 50 to 100 words, learn the numbers up to a couple thousand, 10,000, 50,000, and you're good to go. It takes an hour to learn that stuff, 2 hours maybe.
Probably. All right, man. I think we've done a pretty nice job. Thank you so much for sharing your tips here and there. Guys, again, share this video, comment, subscribe to the channel, do your regular YouTube thing. Jason, thank you again. This is something that I already told to the guys before you, but we just had 24 hours per day. You spent 40 something minutes with me and with the guys for the YouTube channel, so I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Time is definitely the most important resource ever.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, man.
All right, good luck to you.